Good morning, church. Welcome to Woodcrest. Since we're down to one service, I just want to encourage everybody, if you got some space in between, just kind of scoot in, make some room for other families joining us this morning. But I'd like to invite y'all to stand and worship with us this morning. The same God that never fails will not fail me now. He won't fail me now in the waiting. The same God who's never late is working all things out. You're working all things out. Yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. I count on one thing. The same God that never fails will not fail me now. You won't fail me now in the waiting. The same God who's never late is working all things out. You're working all things out.
Yes, I I'm going to encourage you to be seated. And kids, you're dismissed for your time with Miss Laura. I believe she's out in the Commons area. So kids, thanks for being with us for some worship this morning. Good to have you here today. Well, welcome to Woodcrest. And you know that I've been getting mileage out of this idea that it's the last of something, right? And today's my last communion to officiate at Woodcrest. My daughter, ever the practical one, leaned over and said, "Hey, this is your last one. Don't screw it up. Don't spill the juice." You know, I've wrestled all week with what to share. In fact, I actually developed something. I had an option, but last night when I was falling asleep, I didn't feel really good about what I was going to share. But early this morning, like maybe about 3:30, I felt like I got a word from the Lord to share with you. Now, to get to the main idea of what I want to do for this communion is I got to share a bit of a weird analogy. And I know it's weird, but you know me, I do kind of weird analogies sometimes, so hang with me. Now, most of you know that I was diagnosed back in January with a blood clot. And I was put on a blood thinner. And things have gone well. The clot is dissipating, but they still have me on that blood thinner. And I've noticed the past 6 months or so, and those of you that have ever been on a blood thinner, you know this, that if you cut yourself or even just a small scratch, it's like you can't get it to quit bleeding. And I've gone through more Kleenex and Band-Aids trying to get the simplest of cuts just to stop. Well, last weekend, I was out helping my nephew with some brush clearing, some buckthorn with just some sharp edges to it, and I was getting all scratched and cut up. In fact, I didn't even really notice it, and I looked down that my one glove was almost soaked with blood because it was just a real simple scratch, but it kept bleeding and bleeding, and so you know, I kind of got it patched up, and he let me have a few minute break before I continued doing the brushing. But what's happened is the last week I've had all these scratches that have been kind of healing up, and they itch. So you know where I'm going with this, don't you? I start to scratch, and Dawn says, "You're just like a 3-year-old. Would you quit doing that?" And sure enough, things start to bleed again. And I just can't always get it to stop. And I know, weird analogy, but here's where I'm headed with this. 2 passages that I think God gave me this morning. The first is Ephesians 1:7. In Him, we have redemption through His blood, the forgiveness of our trespasses according to the riches of His grace. And then these words in Hebrews chapter 10. For God's will for us was to be made holy by the sacrifice of the body of Jesus Christ once for all time. Under the old covenant, the priests stand and minister before the altar day after day, offering the same sacrifices again and again, which can never take away sin. But our high priest offered himself to God as a single sacrifice for sins, good for all time. Then he sat down in the place of honor at God's right hand. You know, one of the hardest truths for humanity is to grasp the idea that we don't have to do anything to appease God. We don't need to make any more sacrifices. We don't need to pay penance. Jesus has made the one and only sacrifice that matters, and He did it by the shedding of His blood. And it's His shedding of His blood, His shed blood, that continues to cover our sins as we come in faith and repentance to Him. And so God gave me this image that when I couldn't quite get the bleeding to stop on my arm a few times, it was a reminder to me that the blood of Christ continues to cleanse me from sin. He's paid all the cost. He took care of it all. I don't have to do that anymore because He bled for me, and He continues to bleed for me, so that when I come to Him, I can receive forgiveness with a sincere heart. So this morning, our communion is open. You don't have to be a member, regular attender here at Woodcrest. We ask that you have a personal faith relationship with Jesus if you're going to partake. This morning, we'll do it just a little different. We're going to have you come in just a moment. It's a bit crowded this morning, but this will be neat to see everybody come forward. We're going to ask you to pick up both the bread and the cup, head back to your seat, and hold on to it as you reflect on the music. And then I'll come back up at some point and we'll share the Lord's Supper together. I want to do that on this last one. So come with a heart of gratitude this morning, a heart of thankfulness, a heart of repentance that you want to be right with God. And remember, he shed his blood 2,000 years on a cross, but in all reality, that shed blood continues to make atonement for your sin, and you should be glad that that blood continues to flow. Let's pray. Father, thank you for these rich symbols of just how much you love us. They picture the ultimate sacrifice, the once and for all sacrifice. No more goats and no more doves and no more pigeons, no more blood sacrifice of animals, but a once and for all sacrifice of your Son Jesus on a cross. And so I pray as we come to receive the elements and then eventually to partake, that you would do a stirring in our heart. Use whatever analogies or imageries are helpful in our minds to bring us to hearts of gratefulness, with a spirit of repentance, to make sure that we're right with you this morning about the sins in our lives that need forgiveness. And I thank you for your body that was beaten and broken and tattered for me, and for the shedding of your blood that continues to provide forgiveness. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Come and receive.
Of covenant, faithful promises. Time and time again, you have proven you do just what you said. Though the storm may come and the winds may blow, I'll remain steadfast and let my heart learn when you speak a word, it will come to pass. Your faithfulness to me. Great is your faithfulness to me. From the rising sun to the setting same, I will praise your name. Great is your faithfulness to me. God, from age to age, though the earth may pass away, your word remains the same. Your history can prove there's nothing you can't do. You're faithful and true. Though the storms may come and the winds may blow, I'll remain steadfast and let my heart learn when you speak a word, it will come to pass. Great is your faithfulness to me. Great is your faithfulness to me. From the rising sun to the setting same, I will praise your name. Great is your faithfulness to me. I put my faith in Jesus, the anchor me. Great is your faithfulness to me. Great is your faithfulness to me. From the rising sun to the setting sun, we'll praise your name. Great is your faithfulness to me.
On the night in which Jesus was betrayed, after supper, he took some bread, common part of that Passover meal that they were celebrating. He broke that bread, he gave thanks for it, and then he said, "This is my body. Do this in remembrance of me." Let's partake together. Likewise, after that meal, he took probably just a chalice on the table that would have been filled with wine. And he said, "Men, this is a new covenant." And what he meant by that was, a sacrifice is coming that'll be once and for all. I will shed my blood. I will die on a cross for the forgiveness of sin. And he said, so do this in remembrance of me. Let's partake. Father, thank you for the gift of Jesus and his faithfulness to go to a cross and die that we might know the forgiveness of our sins. Faithful then and faithful now. We thank you for that truth. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, I don't think I spilled any juice or crackers on the ground, so all right for my final one, huh? Jose Rodriguez was the meanest, most feared bandit on the Texas-Mexico border. The thief would often slip across state lines, raid the banks of South Texas, and steal them blind. Before they could catch him, he'd race back into Mexico and hide out. No matter how hard the authorities tried, they could never catch him. Finally, the Texans got fed up with the robberies and assigned the toughest Texas Ranger to make the arrest. After a few days of searching, the Ranger found the bandit in a dingy, dusty saloon south of the border. He bolted into the bar, pulled both guns out, and yelled, "Okay, stick him up, Jose. You're under arrest, and I know that you've got the money." Suddenly, a guy over in the corner of the bar butted in. "Wait a minute, senor. Jose doesn't speak English. He's my amigo, so I'll translate for you." And the Ranger said, "Look, we know that he's the bandit we've been looking for. He's stolen $25,000 and we want it back now. Either he pays up or I'm going to fill him full of holes. You tell him that." Okay, amigo. I'll tell him, the man said nervously. So the translator turns to Jose and repeats in Spanish everything the Texas Ranger had said. The Ranger, not knowing a word of Spanish, waited impatiently for the bandit's reply. Rodriguez listened, rubbed his beard and frowned, and then responded in Spanish to this translator. "Okay, they got me. Tell him to go to the well south of town, count 4 stones down from the top of the well, then pull out the one loose stone. There, he'll find a large sack which contains all the money I've stolen." The clever translator turned to the Texas Ranger and translated with a shrug. "Go ahead, you big mouth. Go ahead and shoot me, because I'm not telling you where the money is." To borrow a line from the old movie Cool Hand Luke, what we have here is a failure to communicate. You know, when things get lost in translation, things get pretty complicated. There's nothing more paralyzing to an organization, to a church, or a relationship than bad communication. And when the message gets muddled, confusion reigns supreme. And friends, that's the setting for our next to last message in our Gospel Foundation sermon series from the first 11 chapters of Genesis. We're at the infamous story of the Tower of Babel. Now, as Genesis 11 unfolds, we'll see how and why the human language barrier came into being. Now, according to linguists, there are roughly 6,900 different languages and dialects being spoken in the world today. Yet the Bible tells us that at one time, the whole world was totally unified in a single language. And so as we study this fascinating story of the Tower of Babel, it will become clear that the confusion over the languages is really secondary to the overriding lesson of the debacle. Namely, that man's plans will never thwart the purposes of God. As wise old Solomon once said, many are the plans in the mind of a man, but it is the purpose of the Lord that will stand. And so with that in mind, I want you to stand with me as we read Genesis chapter 11, the story of the Tower of Babel. Now the whole earth had one language and the same words. And as people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly." And they had bricks for stone and bitumen for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower which its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth." And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of man had built. And the Lord said, "Behold, they are one people, and they have all one language, and this is the only beginning of what they will do. And nothing that they propose to do will not be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and there confuse their language, so that they may not understand one another's speech." So the Lord dispersed them from there over the face of all the earth, and they left off building the city. Therefore its name was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth, and from there the Lord dispersed them over the face of all the earth. Father, thank you for your word this morning. This story that we probably at least all know a little bit about. It's a fascinating story with a significant truth for our lives today. So Lord, I pray by the power of your Spirit we would hear that and see that and apply it to our own lives. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you. You can be seated. Now, this story, like so many in the first 11 chapters of Genesis, is just fascinating to me. As best we can tell, no one had ever tried to do anything like this, build a tower like this before or since. This was the greatest building program of the ancient world. But the tower they started was stopped by God, and it eventually crumbled to the ground. Now let me repeat that another way. They started the tower, God stopped it, and along the way he confused their language and scattered them across the face of the earth. Now in order to understand this story, there are a few background facts that we need to know. First, if you put all of the storyline together, the story of the Tower of Babel occurred really just a few generations after Noah's flood. Most scholars believe it happened probably within 150 years of Noah and his family leaving the ark. Now, by this time, the population of the world had expanded considerably from just 8 people to a much larger number. Most likely, there were more than 30,000 people living on earth at the time of Genesis 11. The second fact from this story that helps us in understanding what's going on is that according to the text, in those days, everyone spoke the same language. That fact, as mentioned in verse 1, is crucial to understanding this passage of Scripture. At this point in history, the human race was united in a way that's never been repeated since. Now, if you're a careful student of the Bible, you may wonder how the whole world could speak one language in Genesis 11 when, according to Genesis 10, it states several times that the inhabitants of the earth were divided into tribes and nations, each with its own language or dialect. It says that several times in Genesis 10. So the question is, does Genesis 11 contradict Genesis 10? No, it doesn't contradict it. There's a simple answer to the apparent dilemma. Remember, the Bible isn't always written chronologically. So what Moses has done here, remember Moses is the author of Genesis, he's flip-flop the narrative in order to highlight the essential problem of the human race. So chronologically, the Tower of Babel story comes before the scattering of the nations in Genesis 10. You see, Moses reverses the order to emphasize the high cost of rebelling against God. You see, we're supposed to come to the end of Genesis 10 and ask, how did the world become so hopelessly divided? Well, Moses answers that question in Genesis 11 with the narrative of the Tower of Babel. He's telling us how the world became so divided as defined in chapter 10. Now, the third important fact is that it appears most people lived in the Middle East in an area called Shinar. Now, most historians and scholars and archaeologists believe this is another name for Babylonia or Babylon, which is the region of modern-day Iraq. As the post-flood generations migrated east from Ararat, they settled in the region that we now call the Fertile Crescent, a well-watered plain near the Tigris and Euphrates River. Now, the fourth important piece of background information is that the tower they built was religious in nature. This fact may not be evident from a quick reading of the text. In fact, usually when this story is taught in Sunday school, Sunday school teachers imply that the people were trying to build a tower all the way to heaven. That's probably not accurate. It seems more likely that they were trying to build a tower that would bring heaven down to earth, that they could get the gods, if you would, to come and live among them. Now, some scholars have suggested that the tower was tied to the early development of astrology. And they suggest that at the top of the tower, there may have been an altar surrounded by the signs of the zodiac, making it an enormous symbol of man's attempt to control the universe apart from God. And I really think this suggestion is plausible because we know where astrology originated. It originated in ancient Babylon, in Babylon. And humanity has been doing this ever since, trying to read the stars. Now, at first glance, the religious nature of the Tower of Babel may not seem all that similar to our modern architecture, but perhaps there really isn't much difference after all. When the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York City were first built, they were described as temples of modern commerce and shrines to the ingenuity and prowess of American technology. When our family visited Mount Rushmore many years ago, I remember noting that Mount Rushmore is called the shrine of American democracy. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but we like to put some religious kind of connection with the things that we build. So it should not be a surprise to us that when men were building anything great, they invested with symbolic religious significance. Buildings, statues, and monuments all say something about the values of those who build them and those who support them. So it was a tower, but I think it was much more than a simple piece of architecture. It was a massive, unified effort to bring humanity together, wholly apart from God. So is it any wonder that God stepped in and stopped the building program? Now, there's much about this passage in Genesis, I think, that mirrors our modern world, reminding us that God's word and his principles are timeless for every generation. In fact, I think this text reveals to us what we might call kind of the power game that people play. And we play it today, and they played it way back then in the years after the Great Flood. You see, the builders of the Tower of Babel had two purposes in mind. And they're both mentioned in verse 4, if you got a Bible this morning. The first purpose of the tower, it says, was to make a name for ourselves. The second is summed up in the phrase, lest we be dispersed over the face of the earth. So the tower was meant to make a bold statement. Don't mess with us. We're the greatest city on earth. No one is like us. No one can touch us. How modern does that sound? How modern does that sound? We live in a world that exalts the superlative. Big, bigger, biggest. Good, better, best. Fast, faster, fastest. Smart, smarter, smartest. Rich, richer, richest. We all want to be the est if we can. Why be the if you can be the est? That's why we compete. That's why we keep score. And we Americans, we love a good fight, and we love competition, and we love to win, right? A few weeks back, I couldn't find anything on regular TV worth watching, which isn't shocking these days. So I started glancing through my list of saved movies, and because I'm a big hockey fan, and it was in the middle of the NHL playoffs, I was drawn to the movie Miracle on Ice, the movie about the 1980 Olympics and the U.S. men's hockey team's improbable victory over the Russians. Now, who has seen Miracle on Ice? I mean, many of you have. So you know the storyline. Now, that movie is like 20 years old, and I've watched it more times than I can count, and I certainly know the outcome. But when I watched it again a few weeks ago, my heart was racing, my patriotism was soaring, and as Al Michaels was yelling, "Do you believe in miracles?" I almost started chanting, "USA, USA, USA," in my living room. And it's only 112 days until the Ryder Cup, when America's best golfers take on Europe's best golfers. Red, white, and blue, man. As Al Davis said, just win, baby. No, it's fun to play. It's good to compete. But it's very satisfying to win. Losing stinks. As someone once said, show me a good loser, and I'll show you a loser. That's truly the American point of view. But guess what? It would not have been out of place in ancient Babylon. And I think it's also true that there is a lot of theology in our architecture and our endeavors and our human accomplishments. Show me what you build, or show me where you live or where you wish you lived, and I'll know something about your values. Maybe not everything, but I'll know something important. Friends, the ancient Tower of Babylon was a power game for people who felt the inner need to be number one. They wanted a name, they wanted security, and they thought the tower would give them both. And I think there are two profound implications that we can glean from this reality of ancient Babylon and the Tower of Babel that's mirrored in our society today. First, the compulsive drive for power and prestige stems from our deep-seated fear of dependence on someone else. Whether you want to admit that or not, it's true. We have this deep-seated fear of dependence on someone else, so we want to be the est in our field. Biggest, strongest, smartest, loudest, richest, fastest. Because if we're the est, then others will have to depend on us, right? And we won't have to depend on anyone or anything. As the poet William Henley said, in words that could have been carved on the Tower of Babel, I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. Now, let me pause here and clarify a few things. Is there anything wrong with building a tower? No. Is there anything wrong with working together to build a tower? No. Is there anything wrong with building the tallest tower on earth? No. Is it wrong to advertise that your tower is the tallest on earth? No. But at this point, we're drifting into a danger zone, one that's so subtle that we hardly see it until it captures us completely. You see, my friends, pride is a tricky thing. Do you know it's pride that made Lucifer rebel against God in the first place? Pride was the original sin of the universe. Ambition isn't wrong. Competition isn't wrong. Winning isn't wrong. Celebrating your victories isn't wrong. Being the best isn't wrong. But it's neither entirely innocent either. You see, sin lurks somewhere in the neighborhood when it comes to our accomplishments. And it usually isn't lurking very far away. That's a warning here for us. That's why Jesus declared that it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to do what? Get into heaven. See, when you've got money, power, prestige, or fame, or friends in high places, you often think that you don't need God. But that all changes when you're flat broke and your power is gone and your friends won't return your phone calls. And Jesus showed us the attitude to the pride and hubris that built this ancient tower when he said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek." Now wait a minute, the meek? You must be kidding, Pete. Who wants to be meek? Meekness is weakness, and the weak get crushed. Or do they? No. According to Jesus, the meek inherit the earth. The meek inherit the earth. That leads me to the second implication, which is that the compulsive drive for power and security leads to the moral degeneration of the soul. See, our desperate search for significance, to be the est, can often lead us to compromise our values, our time and again in the name of independence, freedom, and the need to control our own destiny. We want to be like Frank Sinatra and say or sing, "I did it my way," which perfectly expresses the spirit of Babel. And it expresses the American mindset. As a result, we cut corners, break the rules, lie to our parents, our spouse, our friends, and we end up lying to ourselves. We use people and then discard them when they don't fit our plans anymore. And what seems to be noble turns out to be sinister in the end. There's nothing wrong with a tower, and nothing wrong with a good reputation, and nothing wrong with working as a team to accomplish a great goal. But when those things are fueled by arrogance, the end result is grotesque and outright evil. Friends, the tower becomes a symbol of man's independence from God. It's the humanism flower in its fullest bloom. Friends, life is just too hard without God. Because without God, you end up doing desperate things, like building towers that reach to the heavens. Arrogance makes us think we're invincible, but no one is invincible. This reminds me of the haunting words of Isaiah 40. The grass withers, the flower fades when the breath of the Lord blows on it. Surely the people are grass. That's all we really are. Grass that withers and flowers that fade. Here today, gone tomorrow. We don't like to hear that we're meek, that we're weak and mortal, but we are. All of us were born to die. Some of us just get there sooner, that's all. But we'll all eventually get there. So often we're tempted to think, no one can stop me now, no one can touch me. But as they say out west, ain't no horse that can't be rode and ain't no cowboy that can't be throwed. Friends, that's bad grammar, but it's spot-on theology. We desperately need to take these words to heart because we live in a world that encourages us to think we can do it all. Believe it and achieve it. Dream it and do it. No limits on human potential. But remember this. The next time you feel the need to brag about what you've done, pay attention to that faint cracking sound. It's the thin ice beneath your feet that's about to give way. And that's why God stopped the building program in ancient Babylon. If he had let them continue with the tower, they would think they could do anything. So God confounded their language. I read this, I thought it was great. The pipe fitters couldn't understand the electricians, who couldn't understand the truck drivers, who didn't have a clue what the bricklayers were talking about, and that drove the carpenters nuts. Everyone started talking gibberish. No one understood a thing the others were saying, and soon the massive building program came to a halt. And then the text says, the Lord dispersed them or scattered them. And for the fathers teaching their little kids around the fires in ancient Jerusalem, they would say, back a little bit earlier when Moses wrote about how they were all dispersed, that's how come it happened. Pay attention to this. Pay attention to that. And do you know what they called the name of the city after this all happened? The one with the unfinished tower? The one that eventually fell to the ground? They called it Babel, which in Hebrew means confusion. They called it Confusion City. everyone was babbling at the same time, and it drove everyone nuts, so they moved away to get peace and quiet. And that's how we got so many different languages in the world today. It's that simple. God was behind it. God confused the languages, and they couldn't cohabitate together, so they began to spread across the face of the earth. And here's the ultimate irony. Remember back early as to why they built this? They sought to build a tower so that they wouldn't be scattered. They wouldn't be dispersed. But they ended up scattered anyway. Friends, thus does God judge all human efforts that leave him out. He brings down the high and mighty with a great big thud. In fact, I want you to write over this story these words, whether in your mind or in your notes. Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. So as we come to the end of this story, I think there's three questions that seem to jump out from the text to confront us personally. And as usual, I've gotten a 4 or 5 day head start on the questions. So I'm dealing with them too. The first question is, to what extent do I embody the attitude of Babel? Remember, the problem of the tower was not the tower itself, but the attitude that built it in the first place. Anything good can become like the Tower of Babel when we're motivated by pride or paranoia or the need to establish our own independence from God and from others. And friends, there's a mighty thin line between healthy ambition and sinful pride. And any of us can cross it without even knowing it. It's the compulsive need to be in control of every aspect of life, including those around us. That's really what pride is all about. And guess what? I like to be in control. I like to be in charge. So guess what's lurking in my neighborhood? Pride. I have to be careful of that. I have to be careful that I'm embodying the pride attitude of Babel. It's the spirit of Babel that causes us to say, he's God in heaven, but I'm the God of my own little world. Somebody today here or watching on, you need to know that. Don't embody the attitude of Babel. The second question is, in what areas have I experienced the judgment of Babel? In Genesis 11, God judged the people by throwing them into confusion and ruining their massive building program. God does the same thing to us today. We suffer confusion and fear and incredible loneliness in our drive to be the best at whatever we do. I heard of a fortune cookie motto that read, Confucius say, top of the ladder, nice place, but very lonesome. How true. Sometimes we suffer greatly because we're still trying to live according to our own rules and not God's. So we push God to the outer edges of life, and then we do our own thing. But you can't push God to the side and succeed very long. Your tower will come crashing down sooner or later, and when it does, the shaky foundations of your life will be destroyed with it. The final and most important question is, have you embraced the alternative to Babel? Friends, there's only one alternative, the Lord Jesus Christ. I just love the way wise old Solomon confirms this in Proverbs 18:10. This is like one of those nuggets I found when I was panning for gold this week. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. He's the tower. The righteous man, the righteous woman runs into it and is safe. What shall it profit a man? What shall it profit a woman? What shall it profit a company? What shall it profit a church? What shall it profit a team? What shall it profit a family? What shall it profit a leader? What shall it profit a city? What shall it profit a nation? What shall it profit you if you build a mighty tower with your life but lose your soul in the process? You can have Babel with all its power games, its moral degenerations, its paranoia, loneliness, despair, and deceptive pleasure. Or you can have Jesus. Those are really the choices of life. And at this point, the gospel message becomes incredibly relevant to our generation because we too are massive tower builders, including a lot of us Christians. We're ladder climbers, control freaks, estate builders, and compulsive overcommitters. We're looking for love and pleasure and power and purpose and meaning in all the wrong places. We build towers that crumble before our eyes, and we wonder what went wrong. We're too busy building our kingdom to ever seek first the kingdom of God. So no wonder we're frazzled, tired, nervous, uptight, jumpy, irritable, easily distracted, and easily seduced by money, sex, and power. One of my great old-time theologians was a guy by the name of G.K. Chesterton. And one day, many years ago, when the London Daily Mail asked the question, what is wrong with the world? You know what G.K. Chesterton wrote back to the editor with a simple response of, dear sir, I am. I'm what's wrong with the world. And he was right. The spirit of Babel is not just out there, it's inside all of us. Friends, it's the wise man, the wise woman who recognizes how easy it is to build towers in our own strength and for our own glory. And the tricky part is this. You often can't tell by looking at the tower why it was built. Only the Lord knows the thoughts of the heart. So while we may appear to have everything in order because we're happy and busy and successful, God may know that our towers need to come crumbling down. The people of both the ancient and modern world say, come, let us build. And to that approach of life, Jesus says, come to me, all who labor and all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. So my final challenge this morning, if you're tired of building castles in the sand, only to see them washed away by the tides of life, come to Jesus. If you're weary of trying and failing to be the master of your circumstances, come to Jesus. If you're burdened with the pressure of trying to be all things to all people all the time while failing to meet your own expectations, much less anyone else's, come to Jesus. If you're worn out from the fruitless search for power and prestige, come to Jesus. Here's a word for frustrated tower builders everywhere. If you're tired of your life and want something better, come to Jesus. All that hungry hearts seek is found in him. By his death on the cross, our sins are forgiven. And by his resurrection, he's given us new life. We are new creations. Do you know him? Has your heart been changed by his mighty power? If you're tired of building towers that crumble, come to Jesus. Because he's the firm foundation. He's the chief cornerstone that can never be shaken. Build your life on the strong tower of Jesus, and you will never, ever be disappointed. Let's pray. Father, thank you for this amazing story from the book of Genesis. So much meaning, so much significance. But the bottom line reality, it teaches us that trying to build life, to accomplish things in our own strength without you, is a futile, vain effort. And in the end, those things just come crumbling down. So wherever anybody is at today in their spiritual journey, I pray your Spirit would be prompting them with the words of Jesus. Come to me if you're heavy-hearted and weary. Come to Jesus. It's in his name we pray. Amen.
Good morning. My name is Will. I am the student ministries pastor here at Woodcrest. There's nothing I could add. That was a great message, Pastor Pete. But one thing I'm sitting there thinking is there are times where I know that I'm building a tower, and I know I need to do something, and I'll pray and I'll seek, and it's like the Lord's just silent, like testing me or something, and it's kind of annoying, you know, like Lord, what are you doing right now? And an example I give to my students of what faith is often is a chair. Probably none of you in this room, stopped and thought about the chair you're sitting on, if it was going to hold you or not. You just sat down. You expected the chair to do what the chair was supposed to do. You didn't stop and think. You might now. And I don't know anybody who's crashed and fallen, but you put your trust in a chair because time and time again a chair has proven that it's doing what it was supposed to do. Your car's to get here. Maybe you've had car trouble and you turned the key this morning. You're like, okay, thank you, Jesus. But for the most part, you got in your car, you pushed the button, you turned the key, whatever it was. You just got in your car and you expected it to get you where you were going this morning. There are things that we put our faith in time and time again. Doesn't matter how much money you put into your vehicle or how many times you may have had a bad chair fall out from under you or a friend pull it. That's a thing too. But faith is putting your trust into something time and time again because it's proven to be faithful. And so I just encourage you. There are moments in my life where I'm going through tough times or anxiety or frustration or silence from the Lord. And it's like, why, God? But at the end of the day, if I'm going to put my faith and trust into daily things that have no merit on my eternity, then how much more can I put my trust in Jesus at the end of the day also? So just an encouragement for you at the end of that. I got highlights. That was not one of my highlights, but I'm processing. It was good. So Flamingos, this is the last day to buy a raffle ticket for VBS Flamingos. So what Laura started to do last year to help raise money for dinner for VBS is flamingos. You get sent these lawn flamingos, and there's a banner saying that you've been flamingoed or something. I forget what it was, but you have a bunch of pink in your front yard, and it's really fun, and the neighbors all ask, and it's a really cool fundraiser. At the beginning of every VBS, Laura provides dinner. We get a lot of kids from the community. We have no idea what their meals look like, where their last meal may have come from. Everybody may have been well fed up to that point, but Laura wants to ensure that there are no kids with empty stomachs before they hear about the gospel. So that's one thing that she does, and flamingos are part of it. So the first coveted flamingoing, I don't know what it's called. Last year it was Pastor Pete, sent by one of his kids. And so this year, rather than just being like, oh, I'm first, there's a raffle that gets the fundraiser started. You can get a raffle ticket for $1. You write your name on it. You'll put it in there. If you're picked, you get to pick where the flamingos go first. So it's kind of a fun way for you to interact. It's a Kickstarter for the fundraising. If you want more information about the flamingos, VBS registration, or anything like that, you can go to the 7-foot flamingo in our lobby, because that's not normal. So you can go find it. Second thing, envelope fundraiser. High school missions trip to Montana is just about 4 or 5 weeks away, and we're on the home stretch here. When you walk in or out of the building, you will see a big black board with envelopes numbered 1 to 100, and then up to 500 in increments of 25. Those numbers represent amounts. So you'll take an envelope, you'll put the corresponding amount in there, and the full amount goes towards our missions trip. It's a really fun, easy way to do that. All of the students were the ones that designed the envelopes themselves. I have a great couple in the church who are amazing with youth ministry. Husband built the board, so everything is by hand out there. So go and support that, I encourage you. Or use it as an opportunity to also pray for our trip as we're heading up to it. We're going to be gone for 10 days. We're driving out. It's a road trip. So there are a lot of things that you could pray for. Group unity, the working of vehicles. We're going to go visit Yellowstone at the beginning. So no, bison incidents, because that's a thing. So just pray for our group ahead of time. Baptism service, Sunday, July 23rd, 8 o'clock at Schultz Lake Beach. We will be doing a baptism service. Pastor Pete will, in fact, be doing that. We have 3 people currently signed up. So even though his last Sunday is the 25th with us, he's going to reprise his role a few weeks later doing a baptism service that morning. So if you're interested in being baptized, contact our church office, and Lucy will get you rolling with that. And the last thing I have for you is Pastor Pete's final Sunday is June 25th. There will be a celebration that day. You'll want to come and celebrate everything that God has done in and through Pastor Pete and Don and the Parker family. There will be part of the service at the end. That'll be a celebration, and then we're going to do a potluck afterwards. So you can visit a counter out here to sign up to bring something. But it's going to be a good time. It's going to be a good time to come and just celebrate Pastor Pete as he's heading off into the sunset and what God has for him next. So that is all that I have. Next up, I have Derek.
Good morning, everybody. For several weeks, Pete said that once we moved to one service and you came in, you'd have to play nice if there were people in your potential seat you've been sitting in. And I didn't know how quite to deal with that when it ended up being my brother and sister. I felt that innate desire to not play so nice this morning. But no, in all seriousness, it's great to have both of you here this morning, and everyone else too. It's great to see this place really filled up. So my name is Derek Parker. As I mentioned, I've had the privilege of serving on the lead pastor calling committee for several months now. And so hopefully you've heard, but we're really excited. We're just excited for who we believe is the next lead pastor for Woodcrest Church. And so a lot of exciting stuff coming up over the next couple of weeks as we kind of get to the finish line here. So as you sat down this morning, hopefully you saw a handy-dandy postcard on all of your seats. Hang on to this. This has all the relevant, important information that you're going to want to be aware of over the next couple of weeks. As you see at the top, we have things starting even today. So important stuff over the next couple of weeks that you'll want to make sure you're aware of and can come to as much as possible. The one you probably haven't seen or heard of before is the top one. Following the service today and next week in the Rock Room, we'll have a brief 15-minute informational forum to learn about the process. How did we get from where we started when Pete announced he was intending to retire to 2 weeks from today, which will be the big Sunday. So come check that out if you're at all interested in how we kind of got to that process. Lastly, the last 3 parts on that, you'll see are all the events for the actual candidating weekend. So again, 2 weeks away. It's right around the corner. Please know that all the events listed are open to the entire congregation. So please come to as many things that you would like to. We'd love to see you there, and it's a real good opportunity to meet the candidate and see him. If you're unable to make the special business meeting on the 18th, which is where this kind of all culminate with a vote, please know that we'll have absentee ballots available for that as well. Very last thing I have too is Will did a really nice job plugging the 25th. I'll also add that you've probably seen in the communication coming out from Woodcrest that there's sign-ups to go through there as well, to sign up to let us know that you're attending, so that'll be great. I'm part of that group too who's putting on the event, so help us with who's all attending. Number 2 as well is we're doing a potluck church picnic, so make sure you sign up to potentially bring a food item as well. Hopefully there's going to be so many people that we want to make sure we have enough food to feed everyone, so please do that when you sign up. And then last thing, for the next couple of weeks, we will have a couple of individuals out at the Gather Center to answer any questions about the 25th. So for Pete and Dawn's last Sunday and that whole event and everything, if you have any specific questions about that, please know we'll have a couple of people out after the service to answer any specific questions you might have about that. That is all I have for today, and I think passing off to Joe.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Joe Seidel, and I'm part of the leadership board. I'll be leading our prayer moment today for Woodcrest and our prayerful search for our new lead pastor. As we are further along in the process selecting a new pastor, I'll be picking day 14 instead of number 4 and reading from 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 10. I appeal to you, brethren, by the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, that all of you agree and there be no dissensions among you, but that you may be united in the same mind and the same judgment. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we lift up Woodcrest in this season of change. We thank you for the blessing, leadership, and shepherding in these last years by Pastor Pete. We ask you for your blessing on our candidate and our upcoming candidate weekend and the spirit of discernment. We thank you for your many blessings on us individually and as a church, and may we lift up and glorify your name as we seek your wisdom for the road ahead. Amen. Now, as a priest used to say when I was growing up, go in peace and love and serve the Lord.